Hey everybody, welcome to the 3 p.m. Eastern Time session. We're going to wait a couple minutes to make sure everyone has a chance to join us here. But welcome. We'll wait just one more minute. A couple of housekeeping notes here. We will be checking the Q&A. There will be time for some questions for David at the end of the presentation. So feel free to drop those questions either in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will get to those in the latter half. All right. Hey folks, my name is Jeff Dugas. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the communications and marketing manager here at Action Network and Action Builder. And I'm very excited to welcome David Ricardo Abud, a senior organizer with Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance in Los Angeles. Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance is a multiracial workers center that organizes workers in the restaurant and grocery store industry in Koreatown in LA. The organization develops innovative housing, transit, and labor policy for implementation at the local and statewide level. And as you'll hear from David shortly, they were forced to pivot during the COVID pandemic from in-person organizing to more of a hybrid model that incorporates both virtual and in-person organizing. So I'm very excited to hear about the lessons learned in that process and what some of the tools and tactics were that made that shift possible. So David, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Well, it is very exciting to be here with you all. Again, my name is David Abud. I'm a senior organizer at KIWA. So I'm going to be sharing my screen. I have a short presentation ready, and we'll just dive right into it. All right, so does this work? Can you all see this?
Looks great.
All right, okay. So, all right, KIWA. So let me start off just with a little bit of who we are. So we're one of the nation's oldest worker centers. And I'm not sure how familiar people are with worker centers, but they were originally established as a response to the decline in union membership, right? So we've seen a decline that now has somewhat plateaued, maybe now is being reversed a little bit. And so there was this thinking about how is it that we can create and protect workers and lift the floor in particular industries with worker centers, right? So that's where KIWA started, began a couple months before the LA uprisings or the LA riots. And we're a multiracial organization that's more than anything an organization that is an alliance between Latino workers and Korean workers. So here and we organize here in Koreatown. It's about a 3 square mile area technically. We kind of have an idea that Koreatown is everywhere. So it includes kind of like a much larger area outside of that because workers also come from outside of K-Town to go to work, and then who live in K-Town go to Beverly Hills, downtown Los Angeles. Those are kind of the 3 big areas where most restaurant and grocery store workers are going to be working in Los Angeles and in the area that we cover. So that's the area that we're at. It's about the demographics are shifting, but it's about 30% Korean. It's the largest concentration of Koreans, I believe, outside of Korea. Potentially China also has we might be in competition with China there, but It is definitely the capital of Korean expats or emigres or immigrants out in the United States. And it's also about 60% Latino, and then about 10% everything, a little bit of mix of everything else, right? So it's a little bit about Koreatown, the area that we work in. And just again, a summary of what it is that we do. And we focus mostly on organizing, doing strategic workplace campaigns. And I'm going to get a little bit more into what our definition of workplace organizing is and organizing in general. But we support unionizing efforts at grocery stores, restaurants, right? There hasn't been a unionized restaurant in a new unionized restaurant in Los Angeles in over 30 years, and we are about to change that. So I can't give more details about it right now, but we are on a path where that's one of the things that we're about to make happen, which is very exciting. So a little bit of Koreatown, some of the signs, places here. So what is our definition of organizing? So this is one of the reasons I came to KIWA, is because our organizing director, Jose Roberto Hernandez, when I first met him, asked me this question. And it was a question that I had had very few people actually, even though I had been a professional organizer for a few years, no one had actually really answered that question for me before. Or they'd given me kind of like things that were not very concrete, right? So we like to make it, we like to work with definitions that are concrete and that are simple. And so our definition is identify, recruit, and develop leadership. That's it. That's the basis of our organizing program. And we do also a type of organizing that I think is one that hasn't been, I think that has often been neglected for a long time. And that is, for us, the primary aspect of our organizing are house visits, one-on-one conversations, right? So for us, systemic change happens on an individual level. So person by person, transforming not just workers that we're working with, but ourselves as organizers also. And in the process, then transforming workplaces, transforming communities, right? So, and then we have and then that also begs the question, what is leadership? So also for us, we have a very concrete definition for that. And that is that this is not the most precise way, I think, of looking at things, but it gives us something to work with. And what we say is that who is a leader is a scientific thing. It's an objective thing. It's someone who has followers. That's it, right? There are certain qualities of leadership that we can talk about, but in general, someone who is a leader is someone who has followers. And that's what we look for when we're organizing a workplace, right? There's organic leaders that already exist in a workplace, in a community, right? And that's different from the mobilizing that happens, I think, in a lot of types of organizing, or people who say that they're doing organizing, and which is great. Mobilizing is okay, but mobilizing is massive. It's broad. Mobilizing also has to do with usually it's going to be activists that are coming in, right? People that have already been organized. Organizing is selective for us, and so that's what we're looking for. And we talk about it also as kind of being like creating. We talk about it like creating nuclear energy, right? So in order for you to create the nuclear chain reaction, you have to find uranium, right? And uranium is very difficult to find, and it's difficult to mine. And it's even harder to refine to a point where it becomes unstable. And leadership is very similar, right? It's hard to find. Maybe 1 out of 10 house visits that we do will find someone who's a leader, if that. Sometimes it'll be less. But when you find that person and then you start developing and training them, the goal is for us to reproduce ourselves as organizers. So there's often this concept of us replacing ourselves. I'm going to train someone so they can replace me, and then I can go on and do whatever. But that's not what we're trying to do, because I'm not planning on leaving the labor movement anytime soon. I'm not planning on just replacing myself and then going off and working at Goldman Sachs or some corporate in some corporate environment. So what I'm trying to do is reproduce myself, give someone else and train someone with all of the tools and all of the capacities that I have to organize, and then have them go off. And that's what causes that explosive chain reaction, right? And it is something that is a force multiplier, right? I can only, it's going to take me a little bit. It's going to take me probably maybe a year, 2 years to develop some good leadership. But once I have that, once I have 10 people that are solid, that are going out, that are doing house visits, that are recruiting workers, that are organizing workplaces, that understand power. And our definition of power is the ability to get something done in spite resistance. And that power has two components, which is organized people and organized money. That starts to be then something that is quantifiable. You can actually look at how much power is it that you have, how much organized money, how much organized people. And you get people that are able to understand that, articulate it, and make it happen, and are able to push and agitate and create that energy. That's when that nuclear chain reaction starts to happen. And that's when something becomes explosive, right? And so that's what it is that we're trying to do with our model of leadership. So what have we done then since March of 2020? We have, we initially had kind of like shut down operations for 3 weeks, I think probably as everyone else does, and shut down the office, and we're doing everything online. But it became very, very apparent to us very quickly that that was not sustainable, right? How are we going to go and talk to workers that don't want to talk to us, that are being, facing retaliation from their employers, or that are being, or that are out of work right now, through Zoom, right? It's not going to happen. So we decided that we had to go back and continue to do, as safely as possible, continue to do our field program. And so that meant continuing to do house visits, continuing to recruit and identify leaders, to do it, but then also in a different way, right? And so we had to do, when we had membership meetings, instead of having our membership meeting in person with 60 to 100 people that are usually there with it's not our membership meeting, it's our leadership meeting. So it's our leaders within our membership. We weren't gonna be able to do that in person, right? But smaller one-on-ones, right? Outside, masks, those kind of things, we could continue to do. And for me, I think honestly, personally, I was a little alarmed at how quickly many of other people that I was seeing around me just transitioned quickly into just purely online, right? And for us, it's not going to work. For us, if we're really trying to build something new, if we're trying to build something kind of from scratch, if we're trying to unionize new places, if we're trying to build worker committees, we're not going to be able to do that just by having stuff on Zoom, right? And we're a worker center. We don't have the same kind of membership structure as a union does, with a contract and dues paying members, right? So it requires a lot more of that continuous energy and organizing for us. So since we started doing that, we actually were able to accomplish a tremendous amount. And sometimes I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, it's a little bit crazy. We have a staff of, well, now we're getting up to a staff of 18. But with that, doing the amount of work that we did, I think is, and during the pandemic, is pretty astounding. So since 2020, we've conducted over 1,000 house visits. This is during one of our house visit blitzes, where we had members and staff and organizers, volunteer organizers coming out and doing a house visit, what's called a house visit blitz, right? So we went out and identified leaders, talked to people, had one-on-one conversations. We raised and distributed over $5 million in direct economic assistance to workers. And this was something that was happening, I think, at a lot of other organizations. And what was different with us is that initially we started to really gather information about those workers too. And this was something where Action Builder was so key, because we needed to have a database that could be easily accessed, that we could be uploading information onto. And so from each of the people that received economic assistance from us, we would get their full name, their address, their phone number, where they're from, what church they attend, where they work, who referred them, right? And that is already such a treasure trove of data that then we can use as the organizing team when we're going out and saying, okay, this is a leader because they brought these people here, or because they're involved in this church, or because this is someone we want to talk to because they work at XYZ restaurant, right? And including with that was passing out PPE equipment, all of that. So through that process, we recruited 1,600 new members and regularly engaged over 100 volunteer organizers, worker leaders, and community leaders, right? So this is one of our more recent actions that we had with one of the restaurants that we're organizing, which is Genwa Korean Barbecue, one of the largest Korean barbecue joints in Los Angeles. So we were able to do that, right? Then recruit those new members, and now then going out, and now we're in the process of identifying from those new members who are leaders, who are the ones that we're going to start actually training and agitating, organizing, all of that. And through the rest of our outreach efforts, we've reached over 100,000 people through programs on immigration. We had to stop some of our in-person programs. We would usually go out to the Mexican, Honduran, Salvadoran, and Korean consulates almost on a weekly basis to do trainings on your rights as a worker, on your rights in the census, sorry, your rights in the workplace, your rights in and like your rights if you're confronted with ICE or immigration, right? So that's another program that we had set up. We've been doing canvassing almost every single restaurant in Koreatown, passing out information on workers' rights, on your rights under COVID, right? Protections against retaliation, those kind of things. And then we were, with the census, with voter education. So there's a bunch of stuff that we were doing there with all of that. Anyway, and this is so that's a little bit of what we did. This is a picture that I like to sometimes end with, which is what my friends think I do, what my mom thinks I do, what society thinks I do. But what I actually do is house visits, conversations, one-on-one, relationship building. And so for us, the relational aspect of our organizing, that's the key part of our model, right? So this is also a difference between what sometimes I like to call porn style organizing, which is just about bodies, getting bodies out there, versus relational style organizing, right? And I think, and sometimes, for a while, I talked about this as being like, this is the nitty gritty, this is the hard part of organizing that people don't like to do, the down and dirty, whatever. But I actually started to think about it, and that relational style of organizing, the one-on-ones, the building relationships, to me, is actually the most exciting, the most fun, the most powerful type, when you find someone who's like ready to be a leader, who is ready to take action, but just no one has ever come up to them and told them, this is what you can do. To find that person and start training them and developing them as a leader, as an organizer, is incredibly rewarding, right? So I stopped referring to it like that, and I started thinking about it in that way, right? That this is actually the most interesting part of the organizing. It's the stuff that gets me up in the morning. When I say I don't know if I can do this anymore, I don't want to do this, blah blah blah. All of those feelings that often I think we get as organizers. But the moment that I get out and I do a house visit and I have a good conversation and I enjoy it and I have fun and we laugh together, that is really, that's I think what really makes it worth it. But not only that, but I think it's also a very revolutionary act, because under capitalism, we're taught, we're actually, people talk about workers being unorganized, and it's never true. Or workers are always organized. They're just organized by the bosses or organized under capital, right? And what does capital tell us that we can do? We can go to work, we can keep our head down, we can go to our family, we can maybe go to church, that's it, right? So for someone to show up at your house unannounced, knocking on your door, And having a full conversation and then developing a political relationship like this, a professional and a political relationship, which is by politics, I mean having to do with power, right? That is a revolutionary act. None of the workers that we have ever visited, or of the people that we have gone to and had conversations with, which now number in the thousands, none of them had ever had someone do that before, right? And so it's scary when you go out and you talk to people like that, and people, and you tell a new organizer, we're gonna go knock on this person's door, and we're not gonna tell them that we're coming. We're just gonna show up at a time that we assume that they might be home. People get scared, you know, oh my God, what? You're gonna show up unannounced? No call, no text? But that's really where you start. I mean, the organizer lives in that tension, right? We live to create tension in the workplace, create tension individually, create tension in a collective sense. And in that tension, that's where people start to grow, right? That's where things actually start to change. But if you don't create that tension, and starting with that initial house visit that comes out of the blue, then you're not going to be able to actually get to where you need to get. So that's why for us, the in-person organizing continue to be so fundamental. So then let's pivot a little bit then to Action Builder and what that allowed us to do, right? So with Action Builder, since we started using it about a year and a half ago, it's become a fundamental part of our organizing process, right? So let me take that example of the 1,600 new members that we brought in, right? So from that, using Action Builder and putting all of that information on there, and thank you to the folks from Action Builder who were able to guide me through that process, which I initially really fucked up a couple of times, to be honest. But putting all of that massive information on there, we were able to then cut turfs, right? So each of our organizers were assigned a particular zip code, and about 100 to 200 people that had become members, right? And so then those organizers have to go out and recruit or identify or have house visits or conversations with each one of those people in their turf, right? And then each one of the house visits, it allows us for us when we're out there to use the technology that we have for us to first of all easily find who's the next person that we need to go to, where is it that we're going, what's the address, the person that we call, but then also then in the notes that we take, right? So before I got to KIWA, we had another database that we had used, and there were notes that were kind of all over the place, and we didn't really, there wasn't a standardized way that we were actually being able to follow up with people because of that. So there'd be people that maybe had been involved at KIWA for years, but we had no information on them because no one had ever taken notes. No one had ever been like, this is their profile, this is my assessment of them, right? And so now when we go, especially when we're doing a workplace campaign, I mean, it's part of our work ethic that when we prepare the house visit, right? And we usually have 3 steps to a house visit. We have a relational component, we have the purpose of the visit, and then we have the ask for the next steps. And then after every single, using that same format, we're able to evaluate how the visit went. And then we're able to put that onto Action Builder. So if you go now and you look at a workplace that we're organizing, you have all of the workers, we can put their departments on there. You can sort them by department, by the times that they have, we have their information of their days off, their times off, when they're gonna be home, and just information about them. So if something happens, or, you know, I get disappeared by aliens tomorrow, then there's going to be people that are going to be able to follow up with the work that I had done. And then we're able to quantify it too. So we weren't able to quantify that before. Now we can see that every week, how many, because of that, we can see how many attempts we have done, how many attempted doors have we knocked, how many people have we had conversations with, and then we can start to see the numbers part of it, right? Which is, I think, to me, that's part of the science of the organizing, right? is being able to analyze that data that I just shared with you, 1,600 new members, 100,000 people that we reached, more than 100 worker leaders that are continuously involved on a regular basis. That is, we're able to have that information on a big part because we have a tool like Action Builder to use. So that's the fundamental aspect of it. For us, it's not, I mean, to me, it's not, organizing isn't rocket science. There's a science to it that's pretty basic stuff, 3 steps to a house visit structure, how, having a calendar, mapping out a workplace, those kind of things. And then there's an art to it, which that's where the mastering of the one-on-one, of having a conversation, of pushing someone who doesn't want to take action, of training organizers, training rank and filers, training community members, right? That's where then the art of the organizing starts to come in. And so then with Action Builder, it's also not rocket science what we do there. We use it to take notes, to cut turf, to see where people are, and to be able to follow up with that, right? That's it. But to actually do that in a systemic way has been transformational for us, honestly. So I want to finish also with what it is that we're doing moving forward at KIWA. So at this point, we have the fundamental structure, and one of the innovations that we have at KIWA is the ability for us to build a movement at scale and train people and develop people at scale, right? And that starts with the organization. And we had to do a lot in order to have an organization where everyone is rowing in the same direction. And especially when in organizing, which is can get so complex very quickly. And one where we also have to be doing programs, right? We don't get, it's hard to get funding for us to go out and do organizing, right? What foundations are gonna be paying for us to essentially be taking down capitalism in a small way, right? In a very defined area, but they're not going to pay for us to do that. So we have to take on certain programs, meet certain deliverables, do certain services, but all of that always with the idea that that's supporting the organizing work that we're doing. So at this point, we have, as with a team of 11, we're in terms of worker centers, from what I've seen from my research, we have the largest organizing department of any worker center in the country. And that's the model that we're trying to build and replicate, right? Is a team of 12 to 15 people that can really start to have power. And that starts with the director of organizing, the campaign director, the senior organizers under that, the organizers that then the senior organizers or lead organizers are training and developing. The committees that each of those let me finish with this part, with this structure first. We have a research component, or we have a researcher, we have a community affairs person, and then we have a communications person. So that structure, the organizing director, campaign director, senior organizers, community director, researcher, and communications, that's the structure for us that can really start to have power, that can really develop power and can really start to fuck things up. So that's in a good way. And then with that, which is for us, it's a continuous level of supervision that we're able to provide, of support, of training, and of development, because we have this very clear structure, that then we're also able to replicate that in our membership. So in our membership, the highest level of our membership is the volunteer organizing committee. And then under that would be the leaders that we've identified, right? Each of them assigned to a volunteer organizer. And then we have our general membership, right? And so that allows us to provide supervision for each organizer to have 20 to 25 within their first year, 20 to 25 leaders that we've recruited, and a volunteer organizing cadre of 5 to 10 people. So that's the structure that we have. That's where we can replicate that into a workplace with the workers, with identifying those leaders, who are the people that fall under their groups, and we can start training and developing those. So for us, we're not interested. We don't have the time or the capacity to go and talk. There's 9,000 restaurant workers in Koreatown. There's about 60,000 workers. With a staff of 18, it would take us literally years for us to house visit every single one of those. But once you have 10 organizers and 100 volunteer organizers who are moving between 1 to 5 people each, suddenly your forces are multiplied, and you can do a canvas where you do 1,000 house visits in 72 hours, right? Or where you visit an entire workplace gets house visited just with an organizer and their team of volunteer organizers in 72 hours. And that's the capacity that we're starting to build. So we are a 501c3, so we are not able to do the same kind of unionizing that unions are able to do. But we do have some collaborations with UFCW 770, especially where we're starting to explore the possibility of how can we be actually building new unions in workplaces where previously people have thought that is an impossibility, mainly restaurants and new organizing in grocery stores. And that the private sector organizing is something, while we've seen a big increase in public sector organizing and strikes with the teachers unions and in a number of other places, but usually a lot of the times in the public sector, the private sector is a whole other different animal to deal with, right? And often where tactics of repression and retaliation are very intense and are heightened by workers' immigration status, or those things are used against them, right? Immigration status, the poverty, the inability to speak English. So those are the things that then we are having to deal with, right? But that's what we hope to do, that we're establishing a new model of unionizing, of worker organizing, and advocating for going back to the fundamentals of organizing, which is the one-on-one conversations, the relational aspect of it, the building relationships, right? And ultimately, I think that's something that when you start building that community and you start building relationships that are political, that is where you start to see the power really shift. That's where you start to see that because that's one of the things that capital, I think, does to us, is it individualizes us, it atomizes us. So what we're trying to do is take those atoms and crash them against each other, create chain reactions, build out a movement that really has power. So those are some of my comments. I hope that was somewhat interesting, somewhat useful for other folks. I'm very interested also in hearing what are some of the models that you all use, some of the things that what would that kind of organizing look like for you, or if you're doing that kind of organizing, and what have been some of the results for that?
Awesome. Well, David, that was a phenomenal overview of the crucial work you're doing with all the organizers at KIWA. We are going to spend a few minutes now taking some questions. So I encourage folks to drop your questions in the chat or put it in the Q&A. I wanted to start with one question. Juan asked about training materials. And I kind of wanted to spin that into a question about what the training process looks like to get new organizers up and running on Action Builder, and kind of how you do that at KIWA, especially as you're really mindful of scaling up your operations.
So are you talking about training them on Action Builder, or in general, the training that we do with organizers?
Well, both.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
So part of the training on Action Builder is getting on the case of all of my organizers that they're not using it enough. So it's a pretty simple tool, right? Once you get a hang of it, I mean, often there's very little training that we really have to do. It more, beyond like maybe a 15 or 30-minute session. Here's the campaigns, you know, this is how you add a new person, and this is the kind of information and how the notes are that you should be taking, right? But our training process for organizers is basically, there's 5 components that people have to really understand in order to be a really solid organizer. And then there's the experience, right? So the experience is something that takes a while, and for us, it takes, you know, at least a minimum of 2 years for you to start to have done some campaigns or have at least 1 or 2 campaigns under your belt. And there's 3 campaigns that we see as fundamental for organizers to have in terms of experience, right? But let me start with the 5 components that we have for folks that we're training. So the first part is the house visits, right? And the house visit structure. 3 steps to a house visit, understanding that, being able to apply it, being able to start, and then in that, again, it's the experience, right? So doing between 60 to 100 house visits. At that point, then you start to become comfortable with doing them. You don't master them, I don't think, until you've done thousands of them. And even then, there's always new things that you're learning. But the initial 60 to 100 are really key, right? So first part is the house visit. Then there's the 5 steps to an organizing campaign that we have, right? So for us, it's you get a clear and defined assignment, you map it out, and there's different parts of that mapping out that we can talk about. You recruit get an assignment, map it out, ID leaders, then you recruit and develop those leaders, and then you mobilize and strategize. And this part is also a really key aspect, because a lot of campaigns I see, and this was what I saw with the Amazon campaign, is that we want to get into the mobilizing and strategizing right away. We get people that are pissed off. We call them hotshot campaigns, right? You got these hotshots, they're pissed off, working conditions are terrible, blah, 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 whatever. And then you go and you fight based off of that. But you don't do those initial steps, getting an assignment, mapping it out, identifying leaders, recruiting and developing, and then mobilizing and strategizing. And for us, then you build campaigns that are based around power. You don't make them based on particular grievances. They're not grievance-based campaigns, right? It's not about getting a higher minimum wage. It's not about getting benefits. It's not about stopping certain abuses. It is about that, but that's not where the campaign is going to be centered on. What is it going to be centered around? Power, the ability for workers to negotiate, to sit down at the table with their bosses and say, this is what we want, and this is how things should change. And when you start making it about that, then the bosses aren't going to be able to just give you certain, cater to the grievances and increase the wages or whatever, that then is going to take out all of the win from your campaign until they're actually sitting down with you at the table, right? So that's the second aspect of it, is the 5 steps to an organizing campaign. Then we have 4 components to an organizing campaign. For us, it's the organizing is number 1. Then you have the legal component, the research, and the community, which is the media, the politicians, the churches, all of that. That's a comprehensive campaign. And when you understand that, then you can go off and out of any, if you understand those 2 parts, the 5 steps to a campaign and 4 components to it, you can go off and develop and create any kind of campaign on policy, on electoral, on politics, on work, on unionizing, on contract negotiations, on decertifications, whatever it is that you want. So those, the house visit, the 5 steps to an organizing campaign, the 4 components of a campaign. Then we have the calendar, again, not rocket science, goals, objectives, and what are your goals by the end of the week? And then you work backwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if you're doing work on those days. That's in general the flow. And then the 5th part for us is the political, right? The analysis of our reality, our political education, our understanding of capital, of systems, of politics, of economics, of history. That's also a really crucial and fundamental part that we do almost on every other week. We have 2 hours that our entire staff spends doing political education. And for us, that's also a really fundamental aspect of what that is, and then we're able to replicate that with our members. So so those are the 5 things, right, that you have to do in order, that for us you have to do in order to train someone. And then you have the 3 campaigns that you have to do. Is an electoral campaign, a unionizing campaign, and a contract negotiation campaign. Then you get your little diploma and you can say, I have a master's in organizing. But those are the aspects for us. And then the result is, within a year, can you recruit and develop a committee of 25 leaders, and including 5 volunteer organizers.
That's a very detailed breakdown. I appreciate that. So I'm wondering, given all of that, all of those moving pieces and the complexities of, as you said, getting everyone rowing in the same direction, what were some of the biggest adjustments you had to make when the COVID pandemic restricted your ability? I imagine, as you're trying to get the nuclear reaction going, physically separating people and atomizing people, to keep the metaphor up, is, you know, it is a hindrance to that. So I'm curious, what were some of the adjustments you had to make through the course of the pandemic, and some of the things that you're still doing today?
Yeah. Well, I mean, apart from, I mean, there's, for us, I mean, there's the obvious stuff of the safety, right? The masks, the hand sanitizer, the getting all of our staff vaccinated as quickly as possible, encouraging our members to do that. And then the in-person, the shifting from in-person group meetings into virtual ones, which actually for us wasn't as, I mean, again, there's nothing that replaces the feeling of going to a meeting and having 60 to 100 people there, you know, or even the volunteer organizer meeting with 15 to 20 people. But it also allowed people to participate who usually couldn't. People, while they're at work, can tune in. If they have, you know, the childcare no longer has to be something that you have to deal with, right? So it's something that we might keep on and off, or we'll keep as an option to do that. But I think also I mean, having that structure that we had, the supervising, the support of our staff and of our volunteer organizers and of our members, allowed us to continue to do a lot, even though a lot of it was either on a one-on-one basis or through the phone or on Zoom, right, during that time. Yeah, so those were, I would say, some of the adjustments. And obviously, you know, that it was something that we had to be changing reevaluating on a weekly basis, because things were changing so much, you know. And we had, I mean, in the grocery stores that we were monitoring, infection rates of COVID of over 60%, and workers who died in every single one of the stores. So, and we're going out and talking to them, you know, and visiting them. But we had, I mean, throughout the whole pandemic, we only had 2 of our staff that got sick, and they contracted COVID. And it was pretty clear that it happened outside of the work environment. So that maybe one person that contracted it at work, or doing work-related activities. So that, you know, was a testament to the fact that we could do this in a safe and productive way, while minimizing the risks that we had to our staff and to our members.
And you mentioned a couple times mobilizing as opposed to organizing, or maybe in addition to organizing. I was wondering if you could give us a little bit more detail on how the mobilizing aspect fits into the overall strategy. And then a quick plug for one of our sessions tomorrow, which is on the Action Network Action Builder integration, which is all about building that mobilizing to organizing pipeline. Shameless plug. But my question was more about mobilizing and how that fits into your overall power building strategy, which, as you said, is super focused on the organizing piece. Yeah.
So I mean, to me also, mobilizing is an essential aspect to it, right? That's why you have in one of the last step of a campaign is mobilizing, strategizing and mobilizing. And so if you're not actually, you have to exercise that muscle, right? And but you have to be very intentional of how it is, right? So for us, we want to be precise in the organizing that we do. So if we're going to do a mobilization, where we're going to have 60 people turn out. For us, it's not, we're going to invite, 100 people and 60 of them will come, right? But for us, it's how precise can you be? And that's something also that's a muscle that you train organizers to be able to do. So how precise can you be in making sure that the people that you have confirmed are actually going to come out, right? So that there's no surprises. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, I don't know if that starts to answer that question, but it is something that's very key. If we're organizing a workplace, you're going to have certain mobilizations, right? And that's also how you test structures. You test those structures of leadership. You conduct structured tests where how many people can we get to come to this meeting? How many people are going to wear a button or put on a certain kind of a mask or sign a petition, right? And then you start to see through the mobilizing, that allows you to see where the strength of the organizing that you have done. But it's always a reflection then of the organizing that has happened, right? If you've done the one-on-ones, if you've pushed people, if you've challenged them, if you've trained them right, then the mobilizing, it'll show the mobilizations that we have. So when you have a strike, it's going to be 100% of the workers that are out there. Or if it's not 100%, you're going to know exactly who are the scabs that are going to be staying and going to work. So so that's there's an essential part to it. They play into each other a lot, I think. But I think that there's often a lot more of the emphasis on the mobilizing. And for us, as always, the organizing is number one.
And that brings up an interesting, just trying to think through kind of logistically, with Action Builder, you can record if someone wore a button, you can record if someone said they would attend something and if they showed up. Mm-hmm. And then from a macro level, you can see a breakdown of where you stand in the campaign. So you, at the beginning of your presentation, alluded to what you were doing before, which was sort of a non-standard set of criteria that were kept in notes. I'm assuming maybe held by individual organizers, which also affects, mm-hmm. The continuity and ability to plug more people into the campaign over time. Just wondering if you could speak a little bit to how Action Builder has helped create maybe a more sustainable system, or at least something where you could see a broad overview of the data really easily.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the functions that I love the most about using Action Builder is when you're able to see all of the people, you're able to load a certain people that you're trying to that you want to go visit, for example, and that you're able to see them on a map, right? And then you're able to go and use that map, so you can go block by block, and you don't have to go from one place of the city to the other kind of in a very random way. And that's how it was for a while. I mean, we would carry around lists with us of workers. It's a very elegant way of putting a non-standard set of criteria, Jeff, but and a great way a more elegant way of putting that it was kind of a hot mess. But we would have to carry that, or we would do Excel spreadsheets, and it quickly becomes very, you're calling an organizer who's doing something else or in the middle of a visit and being like, hey, do you have this person's address? What is it? Can you text it to me? Blah, blah, blah. So it cuts out all of that, and it makes it much easier for us to do that and to be doing that on the fly also. Which is, I think, when you're out in the field and you need to have certain notes on you, but that they're all there on your phone, and that they're someplace that is safe, that you're not going to lose, that aren't going to get into the wrong hands of someone. I mean, I think it's a big piece of adds a lot to peace of mind, and it just makes us in general much more effective organizers.
That's great. So we're coming to the end here. David, I wanted to thank you, but also give you a chance if there's anything else that folks should take away from this session. Is there?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think this, and who is it? Taylor, thank you for your comment. I think that I mean, the part of being precise in organizing is, I think, really key, and that it's something that you should be getting to a point where there are no surprises for you. And this was very different from the organizing the mobilizing that I was mostly doing before, where it was like, we're gonna have a big Facebook event and we're gonna, you know, if we get 2,000 people that are saying that they're gonna come, there's gonna be 1,000 people that are gonna get there, you know? And it's a very imprecise way. And I was also frustrated at that point because I was like, who are these people? How are they coming to us? You know? And so going from that, which is random and which is mass and kind of open, to that kind of precision of us going into the field and finding and bringing those people out. I mean, that part is, and then through that process, I mean, now we have 100 people that are constantly being engaged that before never had been, you know? So yeah, and I would just encourage organizers, you know, that this is something also that is, the relational part, I can't stress enough, like how much the relational part, the building of relationships, those are the things that are, because we're trying to conquer fear at the end of the day, right? That's the biggest thing that I think the strongest tool that capital uses against workers is fear. Fear of the boss, fear of losing your job, fear of not doing the right thing. And so combating that, to me, one of the key ways of doing it is through building relationships and building trust. So I would encourage people to do that. Also to reach out, you know, I can feel free to share my email address to folks. If you're in Los Angeles, reach out to me if you ever want to come on a house visit, you know. I love hearing from other organizers and talking to other organizers. So yeah, don't be a stranger, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to me, build some new connections, always willing to do that. So thank you all very much for taking your time to listen to me drone on about organizing, but I hope that it is something that was helpful.
We have one request for your email address in the chat.
There you go. You guys can all have it. You can also go to, it should be also on KIWA.org. Yeah, you can also go there and it's on there. But yes, please send me an email, reach out. Would love to hear from you all.
Thank you so much, David. We have one more session today in 7 minutes. Martha put the link in the chat. Hope to see you all there. David, thank you again for the presentation and for all the crucial work you're doing at KIWA, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.